Imagine running a marathon with a brain scanner tracking your every move. It seems like science fiction, but this actually happened in a study a few months ago. And what they found could give you new insights into running faster marathons and even preventing hitting the dreaded wall. So in this video, let's go through what the research found and, based on these new discoveries, 3 ways to hack your brain to achieve your best marathon performance. But why do we care about the brain when it comes to running marathons in the first place? You see, in order to thrive in marathons, you need to master the perfect pacing strategy, which just means running at a consistent, sustainable speed throughout the race while squeezing out every bit of potential you have without causing burnout or hitting the wall. The body does this by constantly checking and interpreting how hard you're working, using a system that's more than just our heart, lungs, and muscles. Instead, we rely on a mix of physical sensations, how we feel, and our mental state to adjust our pace in real time. Simply put, our brain acts like a safety switch, slowing you down when it thinks you're pushing too hard. This is known as central fatigue, or the central governor theory, which is necessary to prevent harm to the body. So now we know the importance of the brain, let's look at what this research paper found and how you can exploit the results in your own running. The brain scanner was strapped to a 27-year-old man who previously had a marathon PB of 3 hours and 10 minutes. He ran an unofficial marathon course on a flat road and throughout the entire event gathered data such as breathing measurements, speed, rate of perceived effort, and of course, brain activity. The brain activity was split into alpha brain waves, indicating a calm yet focused state, and beta brain waves, indicating an active and cognitively engaged state. He finished the marathon in 3 hours and 12 minutes, which credit to him for getting so close to his PB with so much equipment strapped to his head. But even though this performance is impressive, he still experienced hitting the wall. Now, if you've ever ran a marathon, you've probably heard this term and likely experienced hitting the wall yourself. This phenomenon is an abrupt onset of overwhelming fatigue and is believed to occur when your glycogen stores become depleted. We get glycogen when we eat carbs and is our primary fuel source. But when this fuel source runs out, you have to redirect to fat metabolism for fuel, which is less efficient and leads to low blood sugar levels and muscle fatigue. Now, up until the 15th kilometer, the runner was primarily in a calm alpha state. But interestingly, alpha power started to decrease, indicating mental fatigue well before the onset of hitting the wall. Once he hit the wall, the speed dropped, the effort level remained high, and the brain activity remained low. The paper says this aligns with previous literature highlighting the brain's role in fatigue and performance decline. So the 2 key takeaways from this study is to recognize the importance of the brain when it comes to fatigue. And the second is to treat your brain as a precious resource, because this study shows it is the first thing to switch off in a marathon, which then triggers a cascade of other sensations leading to you hitting the wall. So with this research paper in mind, I have created 3 tips you can do right now to run your best marathon. But before we dive in, if you are like most runners, you want to boost performance and lower your injury risk. But let's face it, that's tough. It means learning how to train smarter, but actually following through. And sadly, most runners don't. 80% of you watching will likely get injured in the next 12 months. So let's break the cycle today and make a pledge to yourself, I am going to do things differently. And it starts with a small action to show you're serious. This channel is all about helping you train and run smarter. And the small action you can take right now is to hit subscribe and let Run Smarter tips fill your feed. Then drop a comment saying, I pledge to run smarter. Make this small commitment and start running smarter, faster, and injury-free. The first out of 3 tips you can take from this study is to reduce your cognitive load on race day. Thinking requires energy, and the only fuel the brain uses is glycogen. You heard that right. The same glycogen depletion that leads to you hitting the wall is the same energy source for the brain. So when you are racing and overanalyzing your pace, your distance, fueling strategy, and all the overwhelming emotions associated with race day, your brain is constantly soaking up more and more of this vital fuel source, which leads to glycogen depletion earlier in the race. So to combat this, keep calm and in control of your emotions and look for ways to reduce your cognitive load. Some examples might be to build a race strategy ahead of time by looking over the course map, where the drink stations are, and deciding on your pace ahead of time so you aren't overthinking things on race day. Another helpful tip, if available, is to have a friend pace you or find an official race pacer who will do all the pacing and speed monitoring for you. My second tip ties back to the central governor theory, which remember says that the brain triggers the onset of fatigue when it perceives the level of intensity to be too high and protects the body from further harm. Well, this fatigue threshold is often set way too low in the brain system. And if we can recalibrate it so you can push into harder efforts without that central fatigue system switching on, you will unlock greater opportunities to perform. And the goal with this recalibration is to start doing uncomfortable things in training. That way your body will learn that it's not a threat and won't freak out on race day. So if you are fit and strong enough, I recommend doing one running session per week that scares you a little bit. That might be hard interval sessions of 2 to 3 minute efforts or short 30-second hill sprints repeated 8 to 10 times. But your brain will also be calmer on race day if it is familiar with the effort you are racing at. So during your long runs, throw in some race pace efforts for 10 to 20 minutes at a time. That way your brain starts to trust you at this intensity level and will respond accordingly. And while tip number 1 aims to slow down the rate of glycogen that is being consumed by the brain, tip 3 is all about topping up the brain's fuel source to keep it online as long as possible. We do this in 2 ways. First is to provide a constant influx of glycogen with an adequate fueling strategy. And the second is to block the fatigue receptors in the brain by consuming a special compound, which I'll get to shortly. But the recommended amount of carbs to intake during a marathon is 60 grams per hour. Racing gels usually contain around 30 grams of carbs, but you can also get the same amount of carbs in a sports drink, 5 to 6 pieces of gummy chews, a banana, or packet foods like a nut bar. Taking 30 grams every 30 minutes might be better for those with sensitive stomachs compared to 60 grams on the hour. If you struggle with tolerating even that 30-minute schedule, then train your gut throughout your training. Start with consuming light meals or fruit smoothies before a run and gradually start introducing more food beforehand like breads and fruits. Once your stomach is tolerating food before running, start training your gut to consume small amounts mid-run until you reach the guidelines of 60 grams per hour. This will give your body and brain a steady input of fuel throughout the race. But remember what I said earlier, you can also consume a compound that binds to fatigue receptors in the brain and makes you feel more alert when racing. In fact, it has been shown to improve your running performance more than a $300 super shoe. If you haven't guessed what it is already, this substance is caffeine. But if your goal is to run faster, following the general caffeine guidelines is not the way to go. In fact, I do a deep dive into the research so you can know how much caffeine to consume, at what precise time to take it, and by which delivery method for superior running performance. So check out this video next to see what the research says, and it even converted me, who has never drank coffee in my entire life, into a caffeine advocate who takes caffeine chews whenever I want to perform. So click on that video now and I'll see you there.